Welcome to another episode Eye-Level podcast with Heart. Today is my guest, a neuroscientist with a PhD. He founded a new company called Neuro11 and is about to start this project. His name is Niklas Usler. He's a good friend of mine. I'm very happy and I'm very welcoming you today to this episode. How are you, Niklas?
Hi, Tobias, and all the listeners. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm very good. I think you woke up a bit earlier than me, so I'm doing well. I hope you're awake. I'm ready to go and explain a little bit about who I am and what we do and all these things. So I think it's you have very good formats. So I'm very interested in diving deep into this conversation with you.
Thank you, Niklas. Let's start right away. Who are you?
Yeah, I think that's always a good question, like you can approach this question from various angles. If I would explain where I come from, I would start by saying that I'm a third culture kid. I don't know, have you heard of this, Tobias?
No, not yet.
So it means that you don't really have one specific culture that where you come from. So if I would have lived my life in Germany, it would probably be German culture, because that's where I was born. I was born in Bonn. But since my parents were diplomats, I lived, when I was young, we lived in Burundi in Africa. Then we moved to Sweden, where I went to kindergarten in the German school. Then we came back to Germany, where I spent part of my youth and played a lot of football. And then I went to Kenya for 4 years. And from there over to Poland for 2 years in Warsaw. And then I went for 2 years into a boarding school in Canada. King's Edward School, and that was really good. And then for 4 years, I spent my bachelor in Ottawa, in Canada. And then I came back to Germany to do my alternative civilian service in a hospital. So I was working at an intensive care unit, and for 1 year. And then after that, I did my master in neurosciences, and then my PhD officially in psychology. But I'm actually a neuroscientist because my topic was to investigate why some people are more risk averse and others are more risk loving when it comes to financial decision making. So why do some people buy stocks and others don't? So the question who I am is kind of hard to describe, as you can tell. On the one hand, I'm German. On the other hand, I have some African in me, some Canadian is in me, and that's why I have multiple cultures together. I'm a sport lover, so I love football. That's my number one thing, I think, my whole life. This has been a friend of mine, so that's how I've met a lot of friends, and that's also how we got to know each other. And but I love any kind of sports, really. I used to play a lot of basketball when I lived in Kenya, for example. Also I love the brain, so I'm a neuroscientist. So that's one of my big passions, is to understand the brain. It's a fascination of mine. And if you look at it then again from another angle, this question, who I am, it's a question of personality, really. So what kind of personality do I have? And I would say I'm a very conscientious person. So if I do something, I do it like with 120%. Otherwise, I cannot look myself in the mirror. And yeah, I'm empathic. I'm try to be caring. For a lot of people that also take care of me, and try to be thankful as much as I can. So yeah, and at the same time ambitious, right? Like all of us. Yeah.
What fascinates you about football?
I think what fascinates me is the stuff that you cannot explain, like the stuff like why is it constantly that you have new videos popping up in worldwide football of things that nobody has seen before? I mean, it's a sport that's been out there for decades, right? Like we think we've already seen everything. And then 1 week later, you get a video of like an unbelievable goal that you haven't even thought about, So it's those kind of things. How can these scenarios happen? And then you have like big groups of people, like all these ambitious, women and male teams, that constantly try to strive for the best. So why is it that some of them succeed? Why is it that some of them fail? What are the mechanisms behind it? What kind of personalities? And this is where I come in, where I'm very interested. Why do some personalities work very well together and others don't? Sometimes you will have the best team, right, with the best individual players, but it doesn't mean that they're going to win the World Cup, or it doesn't mean that they're going to win the Champions League. So I think it's those kind of aspects. And for me, and that's also fascination for my company, is how can you perform at your 100% best level? Because you can see in practice a lot of these really good players, they can do anything with the ball, but then under pressure sometimes they cannot even make a simple pass if they're not in the right state of mind. So it's I think, yeah, it's the mental aspect mostly of the game.
And when you have this, maybe you have a moment of a game and you can't really, like, oh, you know what, like, why is this happening again, or what, oh, I can't explain that. How do you go after this moment? Are you like, do you try to explain it to you from a neuroscience way, or is it like just from a soccer perspective, from a football perspective? How do you go there?
I mean, one side that we always see is with those kind of videos, or those kind of moments, we as, like, if you're a fan, you don't really have any inside knowledge, so you can try to explain it to yourself as in, this, maybe he was sick on that day, or maybe he was like this and that. But what gets really interesting is if you know the inside stories. So if I mean, a good example is if you're working with some elite athlete and he still has to finish school, for example, and he's like 18, 19 years old, but he has all his exams during that week. It's very likely that he's not going to perform on the field because he's distracted from something else. If you don't know about that, then you don't know why he's behaving in such a weird way on the field, for example. Or if you have, for example, that Balotelli move that he did in the, they had that international tournament, just he had a good chance to score and he just turned around. Like, why did he do that? Right. So I always try to look at it from like a holistic perspective, because usually, there's not one single explanation for one behavior. You need to really look at it from multiple angles, and it's usually a combination of a lot of different things coming together. So that's what I try to do. And one aspect, of course, is the brain. So if if Zidane got sworn at in the World Cup, why did he give him the headbutt? It's that kind of issue. It's probably a couple of aspects. He's probably been sworn at a lot before. So why did he, in that moment specifically, headbutt Materazzi? So.
Yeah. You mentioned you had a childhood with a lot of different places. What did this insights and this changes, what kind of person created this childhood? Where do you stand now with all these experiences?
I think I thought about this, like what was one of the biggest important moments in my life, and that still has formed me to date. I think especially meeting and playing with slum children was probably the biggest aspect. I did that when I was I was aged, I think, 13, 12. We played a game with our German school against the slum kids, and it was raining, and we were all wearing like shoes with studs on it, like we were the perfect players, in a way. And then they came, they had no studs, they didn't even have shoes, and we're playing on grass. They're sliding everywhere, and they beat us, I think, 7-2 or something. And in that moment, I realized, look, it's not about like what you have, it's about like what you make out of it, and that you need to use that talent or whatever you have and give it your best shot in the end. Otherwise, you can blame it on anything, really. Another big moment I had was when I drove to see when I was again 12, 13, I drove to a stadium with my dad in Kenya to see a national game in Kenya. And there were kids, poor kids, trying to climb the fences, and they were like, taken down by the security guards and really like punched. And I was in this like protected car with my dad driving in, getting good seats, getting something to drink. I felt really like protected. And what this has done to me really is that I talk to my wife also a lot about this, is I have this urge in me to make the best with what I got. I kind of feel like that I owe it to those kids, and I owe it to those humans that didn't have the chance to do the things that I do. So I think that's my number one drive to do, to try my best. So I think that really, it's like I think those experiences from childhood, they're really like inside of me. And then when I was 20, I worked for a German company called Partec, and they created biomedical products. And I went for I think 2 months to Kenya to work for them, and we went on into the countryside, and there was like HIV clinics, and there's all children that had HIV, and they were, they were small sometimes. They were 7-10 year olds, and they in the end played football, you know, on the countryside, and they had to make the best out of their life. And this also really, you know, made an impact on me by saying like, okay, look, it doesn't matter whether I don't have the best phone or whether my phone is broken, you know, this kind of attitude that you realize what you actually like, you should be thankful for with what you have. Doesn't mean that you cannot be proud of what you have, you know, and you shouldn't try to own like a good car or something. It's not about that, but it's about seeing the bigger picture. So that's what's really important for me. Yeah.
And now it led you to founding a company with friends, Neuro11. Why did you do that?
So there's a lot of things or aspects to this. I think that, you know, I started my bachelor with, you know, it's like an interdisciplinary science kind of thing. So I did chemistry, physics, psychology, math, all these different natural sciences. And I realized that the number one thing that interested me was neuroscience. That's why I did my bachelor thesis also in this field with rats back then. So we had to put rats into it was an experiment. You put rats into a swimming pool where it's like a maze inside the swimming pool, and the rats have to find out the best way to swim. And this is how you can measure the working memory. And then the rats get killed. You take the brains and you check for the exact cells inside the brain. So that was my job. I didn't kill them. I just got the brain slices and I put some fluorescent dye on it and I counted the cells in the brain. And even though it seems so abstract, it was really interesting for me. So then I said, okay, look, I want to do a master in neurosciences. And during the master in neurosciences, I did a lot of like stuff on cells, you know, on rats, mice, and all these things. And I realized I really want to work with humans. Like it's much more fun for me to interact, you know, with the actual human beings and experiments. And then I did my first study in football and neuroscience, where we tested or we measured the brain waves during passes inside a gym. And back then all the devices had cables, so you know it was very hard to move. Actually, you had to set it up everything yourself. This was at the German Sport University in Cologne. And this was the first time I really developed like a passion for a project. And I realized, wow, okay, it's neuroscience is like my number one passion when it comes to sciences, you know. And then I realized, okay, there's not a lot of stuff out there about neuroscience in football. So then, you know, I did my master thesis on what happens in the brain when you score a football goal, you know, and kept going on like this. And in the PhD, then I looked at people, what happens in the brain when you make financial decisions, you know, that was very interesting. But at the end of my PhD, I got together with my old friend who I knew from a football school when we were about 13, 14 from FC Cologne. And we talked to each other. We hadn't seen each other in like, I don't know how many years, probably like 8 years. And he comes from a business point of view, you know, he played for Energie Cottbus. This is Patrick, he's also on our website. And he almost became a professional. So he knows a lot about football. You know, he was at a very, very high level. And when we talked a little bit about different topics, and I told him what neuroscience can do. And he's like, Nick, like, and we realized like, this is the future of football. And then I read an article on Ralf Rangnick saying like the future of football lies in neuroscience, because neuroscience is the new like kind of field that can actually measure scientifically mentality, you know, in a way. And that's going to like change the whole game, because it's not about soft factors anymore. It's about hard facts, like, you know, hard measurements that you can actually then work with and train. So once we realized that, we're like, okay, look, there's a great idea. I mean, there's so many techniques out there from neuroscience that you can use to train the brain. So we decided to found the company and write a grant application for the German government. And they said, yeah, this is a great idea. So, you know, we got the financial support for it, and that's how we founded Neuro11 in the end. Together with, I have to say, together with some other guys. So for example, we have another neuroscientist, sports scientist in our team, who's also a professor. And we have a former friend of myself who I also know since I was 7. And he already founded a couple of startups. So, you know, it was good to have that experience also in there to guide you, because doing something like this as a neuroscientist is, you know, it's a whole different field. Like the whole business aspect of it was brand new to me. So that was really, really great to work with these kind of people and learn, you know, like how to actually set up a business. Yeah.
So can I summarize that you want to improve the neuroscience aspect in football?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is that right now you have a lot of also really good psychologists that work in sports, but you know, you always have to find something that is unique for yourself. Like what is the new thing that you bring to the table? So we believe that we can provide services with Neuro 11 that on top of the psychological aspects that exist, we can on top of that deliver the neuroscientific aspects. And for this, you have to have a neuroscientific background. You need to understand how to analyze the data, how to, use the methods appropriately, because you can do a lot of wrong things also, So I think this is what is brand new about us, that we can measure the brain, we can train it, using these hard facts.
Who is your target group?
Elite athletes, because this is also what Kai Rangnick said, for example, in his interview in the beginning. He said, to get to the final percentages in football is not about the body anymore. Like all the athletic training abilities are maxed out, right? You don't know, like you cannot make people faster anymore, in that sense, or stronger. It's like you're already doing a lot of good things. So the next step is the brain, essentially. You have to train the brain. And there's a lot of good approaches, I think, out there already. Even little things to tweak, like you know them, to tweak like practices, you have certain shirts you can use or different, there's many approaches. But I think what we bring to the table is really like, the difficult techniques from science that have been established over the last 20, 30 years. And we apply them in football, and if you want to work with those, like with that kind of technique, if you want to really increase or improve the last final percentages, you need to work with elite athletes because they already have a certain level of training abilities. So they already have a certain skill at, for example, shooting a free kick, right? They're already really, really good at it. They know the technicality about it, but they cannot explain yet that why sometimes under pressure, maybe they cannot perform in a certain way. So this is where we kind of come in. To give you another example, I was just working with a professional golfer, and he told me in golf, in the beginning, when you learn golf, it's 90% about technique and 10% about the brain. And once you're professional, it's actually only 10% technique and it becomes 90% part of the brain. And 90% is the brain, So I think that's a really, really good aspect. And that's exactly the way I think about elite athletes.
You mentioned the free kick training coaching was also mentioned on your website.
Yes.
How can you illustrate this to us?
Okay, I think when I do this, I always start more with the basic thing. So we have different brain frequencies. This is well known. You can look it up on Wikipedia. You can type in brain waves and EEG, and then you'll see, okay, when we're, for example, in a very, very low frequency state, we're more relaxed, even like you can be asleep, for example. And if you get to a higher frequency, you become more attentive, you become more awake. Even it goes up until a stage until you're extremely emotional and you cannot think clearly anymore. And it's like, there's a lot of brain activation going on because that's how that's how we communicate in the brain, right? We use electricity. That's how neurons communicate. And this is what we measure in frequencies. And there's a certain frequency that has been shown from research. Research studies have shown that this increase, if you're more in this kind of state before you perform a motor action. So let's give you an example from golf, for example, before putting. If you're in this kind of brain state, then you have an increased accuracy. And we took this study and we took this research and we said, okay, why don't we make our own study about it in football? Because we wanted to know, okay, does this actually help also accuracy in football? And we found out that when people train normal free kicks, they can improve by 25%. But if they train with also training the brain at the same time, they can increase the precision by 75%. And the actual training works like this. To give you an example, we let a normal person just take elite athlete just take free kicks, and we measure their brain activity right at that moment before they take the free kick, because that's when you have to be. And this is kind of the scientific definition of it. You have to be mentally very focused. You have clear goals in your head, what you're going to do, but from a body point of view, you're relaxed. And this is the magic about it. You need to have that balance. It's like a sniper before a shot. He's relaxed. He like breathes out and then he's like, okay, now he knows exactly what he's doing. And we took that basically into football. And what we do is we calculate an individual index for each person. So everybody is very different. Okay, some people are more, I don't know how you are, Tobias, but I'm more the kind of person that is maybe too intense sometimes. So, I tighten up in those kind of situations sometimes. So I need to relax. I need to calm myself down. And I need to understand what happens when I think certain things. Is it important for me to close my eyes? Do I have to look at the ball? Do I look at the target? It's all these kind of little aspects that I work with the athlete to try to figure out when do you get into that optimum state of mind, into that optimum mental state. And then we, like free kick by free kick, we work with that. He gets a feedback from his own brain activation. So he will get a sound feedback, for example, like an whatever. He can choose whatever he wants, really. And then he knows, okay, now I'm in that perfect state of mind. And I work and I train with him so much that in the end, he's conditioned to it. So he knows exactly how to get into that perfect state of mind. And in the end, ideally, even without the technique. So then, this is where the transfer happens from the training ground onto the competition. It's the 95th minute, it's a free kick. And it's super intense, millions of people are watching, but he knows how to get into that perfect mental state. Like even if somebody like tries to distract him, even if somebody swears at him, he can laugh at it because it's just like, you know what, I don't care. Because when that whistle comes, I know exactly how to get into it. That's why I also like to call it like a mental weapon. It's like, I don't care what anybody says. I know how to get into it. So it's that kind of, that top mentality, like that really like the perfect mentality for something like this is what we try to give people in our mental and neuroscientific training.
And now this person gets a feedback from a sound, and maybe he felt like 10 times in a row. What kind of strategies do you give this person to get into his flow moment?
Yeah, so this is very individual. You need to talk to the person. I have to assess the person also. Like, it's crazy. Sometimes you can see, even like you can look in the eyes and you see if he's awake or not and what kind of brain state he's in. And then I can explain it to him. Even with the data, I can say, look, right now you're in this mental state. So we should do this and this to, for example, wake you up or to chill you out. And I think the very important thing is to also for the athlete, it's not just, the training is not just a stupid like showing of numbers. He's not a machine. I'm trying to see him like just as a normal human being. And for me, it's important that he understands the mechanism behind it. So I explain also the brainwaves to him. I explain all the aspects so that when he, for example, gets very, very stressed before a game or in a game, he knows what that means from a brain point of view. And even just understanding that helps him in the game or, in all those moments surrounding the game. So if you you probably experienced that as a coach a lot. So if you have people, sitting in a dark room and, it's like before a match and you're trying to tell them something, but they're kind of, like sluggish in a way. It doesn't mean that they're not interested in it. Sometimes it just means like he has to understand, okay, what brain state am I in and what do I need to get in order to progress the information better.
So do I understand that right, that the player is getting feedback for his emotional state, and then he gets also more empathetic with himself and understands himself and gets more into his own feelings instead of maybe just rejecting them and saying like, no, I don't have fear or whatever. Did I get that right?
I think that's a good way to look at it. It's like it's a better understanding for your own body. And if you look at it from an athletic point of view, all these players, they constantly try to improve the athletics part already, right? They go to the gym, they look, okay, is this the right way? Can I improve my knee, and all these aspects. And it's the same thing, essentially. You want to understand yourself better, to make better decisions, to say, for example, right now, like coach, right now, I'm not in the optimal brain state. So maybe right now, to be honest, like maybe I shouldn't play right now, or I cannot take all that responsibility that you're asking me from. Let's say like my mom died yesterday. Am I able to go out today to play? And it's this, like you say, it's this understanding and this empathy towards yourself. And that's the other aspect. That's why it's interesting for coaches as well, is understanding your players, right? And properly, like from a scientific point of view, not just like a feeling towards it. It's like, yeah, this guy's always lazy, but this guy always does this, right? It doesn't work like that in the real world. It's not as simple.
So you mentioned coaches. So me standing on the sideline, I might also have different emotional states, and some I'm really relaxed, some I'm really controlled, some I'm very emotional. Would that also help me as a coach to improve my coaching and also my emotional state?
I definitely think so. I think that with players, it's more like a practical, but it's a better way to show it with like free kicks, for example. So it has a more, I'd say, direct impact on the game itself and on the success of a player. But for coaches, I think, and that's why I told this to you before, is it's relevant when you're outside. And let's say there's a guy out there. I can take myself as an example. So for me, when I'm too excited, I make bad decisions. Okay, I think that's also scientifically pretty well known. You know, if you're too excited, too emotional, you make rash decisions. It's you know, it can go into bad directions. So in this, when it comes to this, for example, you have to understand as a coach that instead of maybe yelling at a player who's already too excited, you know, maybe it's his first game and he's like, you know, he's young and he's so excited to be there that maybe it's not as important to yell at him, to really tell him, okay, look, like right now you're doing the wrong thing, but maybe to give him more like a confidence boost and, you know, to talk quietly to him, say everything's cool, man, just relax, do your thing, you know. Maybe this would be the better approach with this kind of person. So I think that as a coach, the benefit of this is to understand yourself in a certain situation, so to bring yourself down. I think that's also something that you are also very interested in, right, Tobias? And the other aspect is how to understand the player, so the empathy towards the player in certain situations.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go back to the headbutt of Zidane in the World Cup final. So basically now you're the coach of Zinedine Zidane and this moment happened. How would you deal with such a player in such a moment, and how would you prepare him for the next match to, not to repeat this headbutt?
I think you know, Zidane in his past, he probably had a you know, like, who am I to talk actually about Zidane? You know, he's one of the best players in the world. You know, what can he do? There's not a lot that he could do better. But one thing that we know from Zidane is that he did have some, before this game actually, right? He had a couple of moments where he got red cards for flipping out, you know, and there are some players that I think we all know that have the tendency to always, you know, have these crazy emotions in themselves, and then, you know, everything erupts into one thing. And it's normal because the humans, they have so much pressure. But then they need to understand, okay, what does pressure actually do to you? And look at the final result of what happens when you headbutt somebody in the World Cup final. I mean, arguably people could say that that's why France didn't win the World Cup, right? That's probably one thing. So the question is, in the end, you have to like work preventatively already. So they should have, after he's had like a couple of those moments, should have sat down with Zidane maybe and should have said like, look, like, you know, you tend to do this. So it's not, you know, it doesn't always have to be seen as like a negative, positive thing, but that's just the fact. That's stuff that just happens. And the consequences from this are that, for example, you get a red card and for 3 games you're out. So it's just like I call it, and what I do with the players, it's like a cold-blooded analysis. You don't think about it as like positive, negative. You just put the facts down and you talk about it. Okay, you're out for 3 games. What does this mean? You have a less likelihood of winning in the next weeks. Do you want that? No, of course you do not. So what are the things what are the approaches we can take? Okay, let's talk about the reason why do you flip out in those moments? And one approach would have been, and of course now it's the past, but would have been to explain to him these different brain states and to actually train with him different scenarios. Of course, you cannot replicate a scenario with 80,000 people watching, but you can do a lot of really good visualization, which a lot of players do. Maybe he does it even. I don't even know. But Wayne Rooney, for example, right? You probably know, like he did it a lot, really. I mean, he said in like a couple of books, he said like in interviews that he really sat down on the night before the game and he imagined everything, even the kit color. He asked the kit man, what kind of color are we wearing tomorrow? And then he visualized the whole process of the game. So if you see that your flaw is to flip out in some games, then you should start training, for example, that people are going to swear at you, people are going to talk bad things about your mother, you know, all these kind of about your sister or about your family. You have to train it because in the end, you have to realize what the consequences. So again, we talk about mental weapon. One mental weapon is really just to laugh at that person and say, you know what, I'm stronger than you, so I'm not going to flip out and we're going to win the World Cup, because that's the ultimate goal in the end. But again, who am I to say, you know, I haven't been in exactly those situations. I'm just explaining my kind of approach to this.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It just was an example. Didn't want to force you to have an opinion about Zidane. It was more like the example itself. You mentioned a really good word when you spoke about your PhD. You said it was about risk. So risk is a big thing in football. like you need to have a lot of risky behavior, you need to be very brave, but on the other hand, one mistake can cause you the match. So how would you, or there are there theses from your work, but also how do you approach risk in your company, in your work with athletes?
Mm-hmm. So I mean, first, I think the number one thing you have to differentiate is like uncertainty and risk. That's what we always did in our institute. So risk is when you know about the consequences and you know about kind of the chances of things being successful or not. And uncertainty is when you have no idea, basically, you can say it that way, you have no idea what's going to happen. Right? It's like with Corona. Like Corona was uncertainty, right? We had no idea. This is a much worse feeling than risks. So when it comes to risks on the field, for example, me as a player playing like as a right wing or something, I need to be clear in my head, what is the risk of me dribbling in this exact moment? Is it a calculated risk? Because of course the chances you're going to lose the ball, you're going to get a counter attack, you're going to lose. Is it a calculated risk that my coach wants me to take? And then even if I don't succeed, but I give it my best, it was a risk that, you know, was taken and it was worth it. Even if we lost, like even if you lost the ball and you didn't win the one-on-one, it was still a risk that was worth to be taken because, you know, you thought about it beforehand and you analyzed, yep, against this kind of defender, I want to take that risk as an attacker. So in our company, I mean, of course, as a startup, you have to take certain risks. And always, you know, the best way to take risks is from a relatively safe standing. So if you, I don't know, let's say you have no money at all and you invest 10,000 euros into something, you know, that is risky, then it's probably not a good idea because you're losing like all your money that you've ever earned, right? So from a company point of view, we don't take too many risks, like as in, you know, risks that can ruin ourselves. You don't want that, but you do have to take some risks in order to be, you know, to have a good payoff. So we carefully think really actually about each decision and who we contact and all these things, because I think can be very quickly that you take a wrong turn, you talk to the wrong people, and then it can go bad. So, yeah.
I got you. I would like to come back to this example. You said, okay, the player has a ball, gets into a dribbling, thinks about, okay, what's the risk? I will do it or not. But a lot of players, they don't think like this. Maybe there's a player who just grew up in the streets. He's just like, boom, going into them and jamming, boom, boom, boom. And there are other players who think too much. How would you approach this risk factor in your coaching?
So one thing in my PhD that I published also on with my co-authors was, why are some people risk averse and others are risk loving with finances, right? So I'm going to explain it to you from that point of view. So there's two main factors. One is what we identified in psychology. It's the risk tolerance. So am I emotionally able to take risks? And one is the risk optimism. So do I understand, why does it make sense for me to take the risk? So for example, this was what I said with the pre-analysis. If a coach says, look, when you're in this position, I want you to take the risk every time. I don't care. I don't care if you lose. At this moment, you take the risk. So that's the player understanding, okay, I'm in this position, I should take the risk. The other thing is he able to in his head, right? Like you said, the risk tolerance. Or does he think about it too much? Does he worry too much about losing the ball and then maybe having a counterattack and getting scored on, right? That's the other end. So maybe that kind of person is just like not really able to take the risk from an emotional point of view. And what's interesting is the risk optimism and the risk tolerance, they correlate. So you can increase the tolerance by increasing the optimism, right? If you understand, like if I would explain to you, why is it important to buy stocks? What's the benefit of it? Why should you buy this and this stock? You would probably, you know, your tolerance would improve because you would say, yeah, okay, no, this makes sense to me. So my emotional part of my brain would say, yeah, no, I'm actually fine with that. And what we found additionally, what's really interesting was there's a brain region called the anterior insula. It's like the frontal part of like insula is like an island, you know, basically you can say, on the side of your brain here in the front. And what it does, it's very relevant for risk and uncertainty. So let me give you an example. Before you go on a roller coaster, that feeling, you know, that feeling in your gut, it's also often described actually as the gut feeling, or when you look at food that has gone bad, like let's say a banana that is like moldy and everything, or a bread, you look at it and you're just like, oh man, like, you know that feeling, right? That feeling is the same feeling that you have when you don't want to take a certain risk, when you don't feel, you know, when you're like, no, I'm staying away from that. And it's a very evolutionary, like it's really in us humans, because it's a very important brain area, right? It tells us stay away from this disgusting food, stay away from this person who's weird, stay away from this location that I don't want to go to. Like if you're alone in the woods at night, it's the same feeling, right? It's not, one part is the anxiety, but the other, or the being afraid, but the other part is this feeling of just like, no, I don't want to deal with that, that gut feeling. And this feeling is also related to people, some people taking risks and others don't, you know? So it's just like a biological thing. It's not even that, you know, like a genetic thing, you can almost say. It's not really that, you know, they can do anything about it. It's just that brain region, for some of them, it's more active, and for others, it's not.
So you mentioned uncertainty, and there are different kinds of coaches in football. For example, some are very clear what they want to have. I want you to do that in this situation. So there's less uncertainty, but there are other coaches who are very successful who just give it, like maybe they give 2 guidelines and they just kick it, just play it. From a viewpoint of uncertainty, what do you think? What kind of approach is good for a player, and how much uncertainty or how much guidelines does a player need?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think I think it's very individually different, you know? Like some players, they need a coach to tell them like, okay, look, when you're in this position, I want you to do this and that. Ideally, you want it to such a degree that it's so like trained in yourself. You know, you have, like you always say, you have these automatic movements, automatic patterns in the game that just happen by themselves, that in the end you can just go out, okay, just kick the ball. But you know, it doesn't, obviously they're not just going to kick the ball. They're going to repeat those patterns that they've learned from practice, from all those sessions. But the important thing is, I think, to keep that bit of individual uncertainty in each player, you know, that bit of magic, you can almost say. Like if I wouldn't tell Mo Salah exactly what to do at every run, you know, in a one-on-one, or Cristiano Ronaldo, or Messi, nobody's going to tell them, you know, exactly what to do, because you want to keep that magic about him, which actually makes him incalculable for any defender, really, right? So I think you can do it to a certain degree, but you shouldn't do it like 100%.
So there became a culture in Germany that soccer more and more became a thing of drills, of exercises. We had a lot of, in the last study about the youth academies was mentioned that a lot of standing time, a lot of explanations. What do you think is the real playing itself, the gamification of football, of soccer? What does that mean to you, and how can we get it back? Or what kind of brain state does the player have when he just plays?
Yeah, I think when you, and this is what you know, we also look at from a research point of view, when you just play, you know, and you're happy and things are, you know, when stuff just happens by itself, you know, like it's a little bit difficult, but you can handle everything, you know, you just enjoy playing. It's kind of like when you're in flow, right? It's the kind of thing that you actually want to achieve. And it's when you don't worry too much about, you know, things maybe not working out or wanting something to work out too much. So it's actually like the optimal brain state. And this is when your best motions, your optimum performance actually happens. Is interestingly, right? From a brain point of view. But when you ask me about playing, for me, playing is really testing out what my boundaries are, testing out what I can do, the kind of risks I can take, and the ones I cannot. So if you'd be a very good defender, and I would be a right back also, and I'm relatively good at dribbling, but I cannot take you in one-on-one, you know, it's something I would test out. And maybe eventually I would see, okay, it's like, you know, playing in a cage, you know, like I would see, okay, in one-on-ones, I can take this guy on. I know exactly what to do, you know, or maybe I can say, oh, no, I'm not going for that. I'd rather play the safe ball in the back. So for me, that's playing. It's like a child trying out things. And it's very important that you make mistakes in that sense. It's very important that you learning from mistakes is more important, as you know, than learning from the stuff that's actually happening well. Like how can you improve if you don't make any mistakes? So this really has to be lived. And I think that's why playing is a very important aspect, especially aspect for young adults and for children to to have in football.
So we have a school system. We have also a football system where we should bring the talent through, or the people through. And what I observe is that often you go into the school with maybe 5, 6 years old. You're very curious. You want to discover everything. You go out of school and you think like, okay, I just do my next job. I have to find a good degree or whatever. Where do you find curiosity in your brain and this feeling of taking risks to discover things?
That's a really good question. I think a lot is about maturity probably, and trying to find yourself. You need to, like, I cannot even tell you exactly when I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know when until probably the age of 20, 21, what I really wanted to do in my life, and then it slowly developed, but I think one talent that I have is to constantly assess whether I'm doing the right thing. Is this something that I like? Is this going towards the right direction? Yes or no? So by always analyzing this, you can always improve step by step, and you can develop clearer and clearer goals. And one thing that I also do in mental coaching, and that has really changed my life, was the brother of a friend of mine who told me, he's like, Mick, have you written down your life goals? And I was like, and I don't know no, I haven't, and he's like, why not? And I was like, I don't know. I know what I want to do in life, and then he said, no, but like literally write them down for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like know what you want in life. And I swear to you, that day changed my life. When I did that the first time, I was, it gave my life, like I literally had to face myself. It's like, looking in the mirror and asking yourself, why are you even doing all these things? Like, what's the point of you doing this? And this is what I really enjoyed also doing with the players, because that I coach, because for them it's, they start to realize, why do I wake up every day? Why do I, they have to work so much. Why do I do that? Why do I take the risk of injuring my knee and, all these aspects? Why am I upset some days? Why am I so happy some days? Why do I love it? Why do I hate it? And in the end, it's all about having the clear goals in your life, the long-term goals towards something, because that will also make you happy and confident in life. But I think that's very individual. So like I said, it's a point of maturity. Some people find it earlier, and I think they're actually really lucky when it comes to that. And some people don't. Maybe they still need, a few years on their journey to figure that out.
So you sat down, you wrote your goals down on the paper. Mm-hmm. What exactly, how does the brain work in this moment?
The good thing is, like, for example, from depression patients or sleeping, we know that writing down clear goals really makes a difference. It's kind of like you're feeling towards, you feel like an obligation towards reaching it. That's why I can recommend it for a lot of people, actually. If you're not clear about your own lives. It's like you're giving a promise to yourself or to somebody to say, I want to reach these kind of goals. And what happens in the brain in this moment is that's something that I also work with in my research, is you have certain, like, your reward structure. You always have certain goals. So you have it's called reward anticipation. So you anticipate a certain reward. If I tell you that if I go and I play in the World Cup final, for me, that's the biggest thing. So I anticipate that reward. That's what I work towards. I want that reward to actually happen. And then when it happens, it's like, boom, like the whole reward system goes off. And essentially creating those goals, this is in your prefrontal cortex up here. What it does is it creates these targets, and it creates this reward anticipation towards getting something. It's like you become greedy towards those goals. So a difference is what you could explain with players is you have some players that are happy with just winning one trophy in their career, maybe. And then you have those players that cannot stop, For them, like maybe Ronaldo, the biggest goal is to be the best player there's ever been. So he doesn't care, like when he wins one trophy, it's like, yeah, it's good. It's like De Bruyne, I think, had a great interview on this, It's like, yeah, you have it, okay, but you sleep one night and then you're like, okay, where's the next one? Because I just, I want to, my target is not only to win one, my target is to be the the best there ever was. And I think that's kind of the mentality that I always also try to, and that I talk about a lot with the players, is like, what is your target in life? Is your target to just be a professional, or do you want to be the best in your position there's ever been? And in the end, honestly, the limits are only in your head. So it's only in your head how high you can get. If you say, I want to get higher than that, then you can try to work for that. In the end, if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. But the first limit is in your head.
So you said about it's a reward system. And instead of having maybe fear of losing something, you're achieving one title after another. 10 minutes after the trophy, you want to get for the next one. But do you think there could also be a reward system inside instead of outside? Or how do you match the inside feelings with what's happening in the outside world?
So you're talking about more about like your inner goals compared to society rewarding you in a way?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. So maybe, and that's what also I try to live my life after, is just being happy. That's my number one goal. So that no matter what happens, basically, to me, if I work with, I don't know, Barack Obama, I will be as happy as if I would work with, I don't know, some intern at some random company. It's the same. I'm trying to to not make it dependent, my happiness or my inner drive or my reward, depending on outside influence. Because if you make it dependable on outside influence, let's say, for example, you play a great game and your Instagram fans, go up, and then you lose a lot of Instagram fans again because you did something bad. It's like an emotional roller coaster the whole time. You go up and down, up and down, up and down. And this is extremely stressful for the brain. It's very hard for you to perform if you're constantly undergoing this roller coaster. So it's very important to stay, like within yourself, to know exactly your inner targets, your inner rewards. And when you reach those inner rewards, like for example, just being happy, you become more like balanced in your everyday life. So this is, I think, a very important aspect for elite athletes, to become balanced, to work on being balanced, to perform every day.
So can you give us a little insight? What were the things you wrote down on this day? How did they guide your life? And when you look back now on this moment, what do you think? Did they fulfill other lifelong goals? What happened since this date?
Well, first of all, I got married. So I think what it did was, of course, I had stuff written down, like maybe how many kids I want, and all these kind of things. But the number one thing I really realized was that, and I think a lot of people struggle with that in their youth, is like you want a lot of materialistic things. You want this, you want, what are you actually like? Why are you working so hard? What are you striving for? Do you want that new BMW? Do you want, like that kind of thing? But for me, I realized when I did this, no, I just want to be happy. And in order to be happy, there's certain ways to look at it, of course. One thing is to be healthy, to, of course, earn enough money to deal with problems, to say. But to a certain degree, it doesn't make you happier. Then to have good friends, for example, to really build connections with people. So I think that's also one important aspect. You have to have, positive relationships, as I would call it. So negative relationships, are people who are maybe detrimental to you, that kind of, they steal your time. It's like negative thoughts associated with that. It's like, it doesn't help you basically to be happy. A great place to live, a great, like, basically foundation for your life. So this is kind of what I realized, that I want to build my own foundation for my life that is going to support me in reaching my, like, very ambitious targets,
Thank you for this insight. Yeah. So there was this documentary of Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, and Phil Jackson, and mindfulness meditation was a big topic. And also other athletes are going into yoga, into meditation. And also Erling Haaland, for example, does it when he scores a goal, this little celebration. Can you explain us, first of all, what is your attitude towards meditation, and then what happens during meditation in the brain?
I think the magic about meditation is that there is no magic to it. It's not this thing that only some people can do. Everybody can do it, and it's simple, and you can do it anywhere in the world. And you don't even need anybody to really teach you. You know, you can read up on it yourself. You can develop it for yourself. And I think that's the coolest thing about it. It's really about, if you read up on it from a neuroscientific point of view, you can see it's, you know, we're all mind wandering the whole day, right? You have some topics and you constantly, like, I don't know, if I clean the kitchen or whatever, I will think about some topic and I'm mind wandering, and it's not really helping me, you know? It's like this normal brain, it's called like a resting brain state. It's like this brain state that we're constantly in, like your brain is constantly trying to work out some issues. But what meditation does is it gives you a way to control your mind, to control your thoughts. You know, doesn't mean that you like, you know, it's not like a hard control of the thoughts. It's more like really understanding, why am I right now like this and why am I right now like that? For me, meditation was very helpful because maybe now I'm like, you know, a bit more confident when I talk, but because I had a lot of stress and everything, you know, like everybody probably does, you can develop some anxiety issues. Maybe we're talking in front of people. And this was one form to understand for myself. I need to calm myself down, and I cannot tense up. And then I'm much better at performing at something. For other people, I mean, there's, you know, there's research that shows that it can be, you know, help, I don't know, panic attacks, anxiety disorders, you know, to really set like goals in life. And what it essentially does, it really calms the brain down, right? So if you look at the waves again, like I mentioned earlier, the brain waves, there's research that shows that, you know, the brain frequency basically decreases, especially in those areas that always think, you know, that are always like mind wandering. It really like decreases the amount of activation. And that's really good because you have to think about it also I always try to explain it like this: when you're constantly going, you know, like you're the whole day is like filled with different issues. You're stressed the whole time. You know, you're even doing the motion right now. I know you know what I mean. So imagine like this: you're in a supermarket and it's constantly people in there, constantly taking out, you know, the bookshelves, like the food, you know, is constantly gone. At a certain point, you cannot fill them up anymore, right? Because everything's gone. It's always busy. So what you need to do is really, you need to get those people out for a second, and you need to relax and you need to refill that energy. Basically, that's one way of maybe explaining it in a more visual way. And you need to recharge. So you need to organize everything again. You need to give your brain like a rest, to organize that again, and to be, honestly, to be stupid for a bit, just to be, you know, to be in the moment. And when you're in that moment, you learn about that, it changes the structure of the brain in the long run. It's like with any training you do. If you do that, let's say every day for a month, it's going to change the structure in your brain, and you can improve on, for example, anxiety or, you know, just having control over what you're actually doing. So you don't tend to flip out. You don't, because you understand, or like your brain has developed a better connection to actually calming down in those moments. You've dealt with them, you know?
So
one example I could give you also, Toby, one more is, you know, do you know the Panometer here in Leipzig? Because it's where I live right now.
yeah.
They have a thing called, right now they had a thing called Carola's Garden, which is like a big garden. It's a 360-degree, 360-degree like description and image of something. In this case, it was a big garden. So you stand up there and you hear all these sounds coming from a garden. You have this great visual input. So what I did was, like, this is like, I can recommend this to anybody. If you have those kind of moments and there's a lot of interesting sounds, for example, going on, just sit down, close your eyes, and just be in the moment and appreciate the little moments. Because when you do that, you become more aware of your brain and more aware of your mind, and it can actually calm you down in situations when you're very stressed.
And that is scientifically proven that it calms you down in stress situations.
Yeah, it will decrease the brain frequency, for example. Yeah, so you're in control, and that's actually the whole mission that we have also with Neuro 11. We want to give players and people the ability to control their mind. You know, we want to give them, because when you control your mind, you're in control of your life, right? Because you know exactly what you're doing. You're not just, you don't feel like you're a victim of your thoughts. You feel like you're in control. You can do whatever you choose.
Can you explain that to us? What, for example, what is the frequency of fear and anxiety? What is the frequency of happiness? And then what does meditation maybe does to these frequencies? Can you explain that?
I mean, this is very, very simplified, okay? And probably a lot of neuroscientists would slap my face for it. But when you're very emotional, maybe let's say, so when you're very angry or extremely happy, you at a very high frequency. Okay, this is called like gamma frequency, for example. Okay, you can look this up if you type in EEG waves on Wikipedia or on Google, you can see it. And what meditation does, it really calms you down. Like it really decreases these brain waves from like, let's say 30 hertz down to like 8 hertz, 4 hertz, you know, this range. And when you go lower than that, then you fall asleep. So there's this story of like monks, for example, you know, in Buddhism, you have these monks walking around with sticks because in the beginning, all those, you know, new monks that try to, you know, meditate, or they have to meditate a lot, they actually, they walk around, they get hit by the stick because they tend to fall asleep because they dip too low, you know, and then they fall asleep and they're not meditating anymore. So meditating is more about this relaxed, attentive state, right? But it's not falling asleep. So I don't know if you've experienced, Tobias, but first time I did like meditation with my mom, for example, she fell asleep right away because people tend to really, you know, relax and dip too much into it and then they fall asleep.
Okay, thank you for that. Niklas, how do you define success?
Yeah, it's a good one. I thought about that a lot. And for me, again, it came down to being happy every day. So this means for me that at the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and I can say I've tried my best and I stuck to my my principles. And then this again, you know, when I'm happy and you know, I followed, basically I did everything to achieve my dreams, but in a respectful and proper way. Then this on top in turn gives me confidence. So being successful for me is being happy and confident. It doesn't mean, you know, money for me is a byproduct of being good at something, being passionate for something, and being, you know, trying your best. Then this will come by itself. So for me, money doesn't equal success.
So the name of this podcast is Eye Level Podcast. What is eye level for you?
I think eye level is about respect, first of all. You don't see yourself as being superior or inferior, actually, also. So that's why I think it's a really good name for it, Tobias. You know, like sometimes you've probably also interacted with people, also in the football world, this happens a lot, unfortunately, where people have this feeling that they're superior to you. But for me, any human being has the right to be on the same eye level. This is very important. Like, and this, I have the deepest respect for some people now that I've dealt with, some pretty important people in football that have treated me in a very eye level, respectful way. You know, for those people, honestly, I have the deepest respect because I think it's very hard that when you're successful as in, you know, famous, and in this case, to keep your, you know, down to earth mentality, to really understand, look, even the person cleaning the toilet is important for any organization, right? Even, you know, like anybody plays their role. And when you understand this, I think then you realize how important eye level is in any moment, you know, saying hello. I mean, I've had doctors, for example, when I worked at the ICU and I was just a CV, as we call it in German, doing my civilian service, I was considered a nobody, right? And some doctors, they would greet me, they would be nice to me, you know, because they understood it. They probably did it themselves when they were young. And then you had the other ones who didn't even, you know, look at you like at all, because they didn't care about you. They just thought, oh, this guy's a CV. You know, and for me, it was in those moments when I realized, okay, look, I have to treat everybody the same, in the same respectful way from the beginning. So that's one of my principles too. If I meet somebody new, I always give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't care what anybody said about them. I will deal with them, and then I will make my own opinion, depending on my interaction with them.
Yeah, there's a saying in German that you say, like, some people say you have to earn my trust. I live it a different way. I say you have my trust. You can only lose it, but you have it. So, and yeah, that's for me a big point, how to deal with somebody. And I would like to ask you another question. If you put your hand on your heart, how did you first get access to your heart, to this, to this organ, what is in your body?
I think this question is always funny for a neuroscientist, because the heart doesn't have a feeling by itself, right? The heart feeling is about happiness. You know, it's like when your heart pounds, it's about like, you know, something exciting happening. So this again comes from the brain. So it's actually, from my point of view, it's always all about the brain. But I understand your question as in like, where did you find your passion, right? That's kind of the idea. So for me, the passion was first, of course, I developed it the first time on the soccer pitch. I think that's, as a true football player, you know, like who loves the game, that's where you develop it. The whole like passion for it, you know, those moments when you think back and they can be like, I don't know how many years, decades away, when I'm an old man, and I will think about this moment when I was on the field and my best friend, he scored the final goal in the final and we won the tournament, you know, it's those moments of real happiness and togetherness and everything. And then the other time was when I think when I started my bachelor thesis, was my first project that I developed a passion for. And I realized that if I do a project that has to, you know, like kind of gets me into the flow because it has a certain degree of difficulty, but it really has my 100% interest, then I developed this passion for it, and it's something worth fighting for. So I think that's when I got my access to my heart, when I realized it's, on the one side, it's like the sports aspect and it's the neuroscience aspect. And that's why, you know, I mean, you can probably tell I'm really excited for Neuro 11, because this is my, you know, my heart is fully into it because of these passions.
So now you mentioned one part, that's a passion. And you also mentioned before that you are married. How is this a different feeling for you now, thinking about your wife and thinking about Neuro 11?
I mean, essentially, Neuro 11 is just a thing, right? It's just a company. And who was it? I think Gandhi said, you shouldn't develop any feelings for materials, you know, it's meant for humans. And I think it was Gandhi, but I think that's very important aspect. So for me, love for the company means rather, yeah, it's more like a passion thing, you know. I want to be ambitious. I want to have success with it. But love for my wife means that I have a feeling of very deep respect for a person. So it's extremely at eye level. That's very important for me. And there's really sincere appreciation for the other human being. You appreciate that you have this. I mean, think about it. Like what are the chances of us talking right now? It's so slim statistically. Winning the lottery is a joke compared to this, right? Like, first of all, humans existing is crazy. Then think about that. We were the ones to be selected, or not to be selected, but the ones actually born, right? Then living a healthy life, then being in football, then meeting at Leipzig. I mean, what are the chances of all this happening? So it's the same with meeting your partner, right? I mean, what is the chance of getting that right person that fits with your personality? Because in the end, that's also how I see a lot of life is when people they have different personalities, and do they fit together? Yes or no? And then that it fits also on top of that with the families, you know, with all the different aspects. And I think you have to be very appreciative of, and thankful to live this kind of life, to be able to meet these kind of people. Yeah.
Thank you for that. What was the most formative moment in your life, Niklas?
Yeah, I think there were a couple. One was, like I mentioned, playing in the slum with those kids. That was a feeling. I mean, you know, when I grew up and we drove to school every day, and I lived pretty well, and we had a driver. He drove me to school. I mean, that's crazy. Think about that, right? And as a child, you cannot appreciate it because you're just like, you've never earned money. You don't know what that means. But then you have kids knocking at your window on the street, sniffing glue at the same time, and they're street kids. And at that moment, maybe you're not processing it, but it develops like more later in life when you flash back and you're just like, whoa, man, like that was really crazy, you know, like seeing those kind of poor people. So that's one very big thing. And to remember to stay modest and to be happy for what you got. And the other big aspect is freedom, really. I think that moving to Canada was, and that's why like Canada is also in me, you know, because I lived there for 6 years. I have good friends there still. It's Canada is really, and in Germany we experienced that a lot too, is about freedom in the end, the freedom of choice. I mean, you have that in the US as well, right? I mean, like you get to really decide on what path you want to follow. And in Canada, it was to such an extreme degree that when I arrived and people left the car keys in the car and left the doors of the homes open, that amount of freedom for me was just insane. I mean, coming from, you know, from Africa or Poland and then going over there and seeing like, wow, you know, I remember I was on the weekend, I was out with staying at a friend's place, and we drove, because you're allowed to when you're 16, right? We drove and we go into the like a shop or something, and he just leaves the car keys. I'm like, yo, you forgot your car keys. He's like, what are you talking about? You know, for them, it's just normal to leave the car keys in. And for me, that was just like, man, like this exists. That's unbelievable. That's so awesome. You know, so I think that feeling of freedom, and together with the feeling of modesty is very important. I think it really formed me, and yeah, helped me definitely. I think otherwise maybe I wouldn't be as appreciative in life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this diverse experiences. I think that it's amazing to hear that. Maybe I have to go to Canada.
Yeah, you should. You should.
So, one more question. In which moment in your life did you feel the most resistance? And how did you deal with that? And how did you go through it?
I think the hardest thing I ever had to do was the PhD. I mean, like that is really such a high level of you know, of science and research that it really pushed me to the boundaries. It's really, especially because I wanted to be good at it. You know, I mean, you can just do it just like that. That's fine. But I wanted to have like the best grade and everything. So one prerequisite for that is to publish. And if you do a very big study, which we did with around 150 adults, and you know, I had to do all this kind of analysis. I went to the US, to North Carolina, and to Seattle for that, for the whole analysis and everything. And you come back, and then what happens in research, right? You have this, it's called a peer review. So you send in your manuscript and all the data and all the stuff you've been working on for years, right? You've put so much energy into it, and some anonymous other researchers, they get it and they evaluate it. They give you a feedback, and depending on that feedback, it's either going to be rejected. There's like a major revision, meaning that you do have a chance of it being published if you correct these things, or you can get lucky and it just gets accepted, or it's like a minor thing you have to fix. Anyways, when I got my biggest project that I, you know, ever probably will do with those 150 people, which is a lot, and it came back to me and it said, like, from some anonymous researcher, said, look, this is not good enough for anything. Once you have maybe collected 1,000 people, that's when we can start talking. I was so mad, you know, like it pushed me to a point where I thought, like, why am I even doing this? Why am I investing all this time? Because it's just some anonymous guy. Maybe he had a bad day and he just thought it was bad, you know? So I think this really pushed me to a limit, and I felt the biggest resistance, but I really learned from that, in that, you know, again, with like the growth mindset, you know, to basically understand what happened, you know, like to decrease your emotion, to analyze it, and to be like, okay, look, like today was a bad day. I think I ate 3 ice creams on that day or something, 3 magnums, because I was so frustrated at home. Which is fine, I think. But then after like a couple of days, you should, you know, you have to bounce back and you have to give it your best. And in the end, you know, I got a very successful PhD. So I'm happy for that experience, because now everything that comes our way, especially with Corona and having a startup, you know, I've kind of reached my mental limits before. So I know, okay, you know, I can deal with it much, much better. And I think that's very important in life for growth, right?
Thank you. What is the best book you read so far, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to answer these questions. There's I think a lot of people would say this, but I have to tell you there are 2. I cannot tell you one, because one that you probably already know, I have it here. It's Mindset. from Carol Dweck about the growth mindset and about, you know, like not being in a fixed state of mind and always thinking about, okay, what are the positive side of things coming out? I think that's very important because it's a very good book because it gives you really a life philosophy. You can never lose. If you have this mindset, you can never lose in life. You will always see what are the good things about even a loss. Even if you get, I don't know, it sounds stupid, but it really is that way. Even if you get, you know, the worst things done to you, you can try to see the positive side of it. And it's really a life changer. So I can recommend it to everybody. Even Bill Gates commented on it, I think. Yeah, so that's a pretty big deal, I guess, because he reads a lot of books. And then the other thing that I mention a lot is happiness, right? So after my PhD, I also thought about, instead of creating the company, I thought about applying or working for the Happiness Research Institute in Denmark. You know, in Denmark, they're probably apparently the most happy people out there. And they wrote this book, The Little Book of Lykke, so the Little Book of Happiness. And the Research Institute looks at happiness from like a scientific point of view. So what are the aspects that actually make humans happy? Of course, they're very individual to each person. But what this book also does is if you pursue happiness, and you probably know that the movie The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, that's also a good one I can recommend. But they're basically, there's 6 big factors in this. So one is the feeling of togetherness. So having like a society, you know, like having relationships, you know, being very social, that kind of aspect. Then you have money, because like I said, it decreases your problems. That's really the number one thing. If you get ill or whatever, you know, you can help. You can also help other people. Health is one big issue, to understand that health is part of happiness. I think that's very clear. Freedom, trust, and that's one aspect we can discuss in a second. And then kindness to other people. So trust, I think, is also a big one. Like, I mean, I've met people that have done bad things to me. You know, I think a lot of us have. There were bad things that happened in the past with some people. But the big question you have to ask yourself always is, do I want to live my life in a way where I don't trust people? Like what you mentioned before. Do I trust people, you know, from the get-go? Or do I want to be the kind of person that doesn't trust anybody? And arguing from a happiness point of view, it's very important that you initially trust more people than you distrust, you know, and then rather maybe take your trust taken away or something. This can always happen, of course, if things go bad, you know, you don't resonate on the same frequency, or, you know, you're being manipulated. But I think having trust towards other human beings is very, very, very important.
Thank you for that. What is down-to-earth spirituality for you?
So maybe you can explain this question just a little bit more.
So basically, down-to-earth, I think that's clear to understand. And spirituality means basically to work for, or to drive for, greater sense, to have something bigger than yourself, what you're looking for, what makes the spirit, for example, of a company.
I think it's important to connect with yourself and others in a very positive way. So, you know, it's like, I don't know how to say this, like sometimes it's very, very hard to define certain things. Like with your best friends, for example, you would have a certain level. It's really weird to explain, right? But when you talk to your best friend or you laugh about certain things, you have a certain resonance, you know, going in like both ways. And I think we talked to like about spirituality. I think it's very important to be positive when you connect with other people. So don't be too negative. You can be critical, but sometimes, especially as Germans, maybe we're too critical of a lot of things. So maybe if you think about spirituality, my idea is to be more like a positive, non-judgmental guy. And also in this aspect, understanding the bigger picture of things. So for example, when my grandfather was, how old was he? I think 94 or 93. He went to an old folks home because my grandmother died, and I was fortunate enough in Bonn to spend a lot of like coffee kind of sessions with him in the afternoons on the weekends and talk to him. And he always said, Nick, like, you need to calm down, you know, you need to like relax a little bit. You're too intense. And I never really understood what he meant, to be honest. I was always like, what are you talking about? You know, like I'm relaxed, you know, and all this. And he probably meant that, he just meant like, you need to connect with yourself. You know, you need to focus your energy and not be like all over the place. He probably didn't know how to say it right, but you know, you need to find like your inner core in order to be more confident and in order to be, you know, to be better at communicating with people. So I think that's, it's important also in this aspect to not, you know, always judge everything by like the little things, you know, like if you have one bad day, it makes no difference in the long run, you know, if you're going to be happy or not. So I think that's, I'm not a very spiritual guy. I look at a lot of things from a scientific point of view, you know, even when I think about meditation, but I think there's something magic in a lot of things. And I don't want to take away that good energy, honestly. Like even just now in Carola's garden yesterday in the museum, on this thing, they had a little stone, I forgot, a stump, I think it's called, a Buddhist stump, where it's like, you know, positive energy flowing through it. Of course, as a scientist, I could argue, what are you talking about? There's no positive energy going through this. But then on the other hand, I would say, why would I take this away? You know, if it helps people, there's no negativity coming from it. So why would I argue that it doesn't exist? You know? So it's always like this, you know, a fine line of being not too scientific, I think, and then maybe from my point of view, also not being too spiritual. Like the extremes are not that good.
Yeah. I like your point of non-judgmental, of being not judgmental. I think that's a big point, because then you're present, you're with yourself, you know yourself, and you accept and be an eye level. So I like this point a lot, and I think that awakes the spirit in somebody else. If I just, for example, like you and me, I'm listening to you, and I give you the chance to show who you are. And that's basically what makes me happy again, because whenever you give something, you receive something back. And so it's a give and take in both directions. So
Yeah.
I would like to conclude with the last question. What is the change you would like to see in the world?
I think, especially in Western culture, we're driven a lot towards money. It's like money is this thing that portrays, that will give you instant happiness, you know, like success is defined as having money. You know, a lot of people, like, they equate it with it. But for me, I would like to see in a lot of people more alive, like towards happiness, towards like, you know, getting towards those things that I mentioned, you know, because you can be a happy guy even with no money if you have all the other aspects. If you're a healthy guy, you know, if you have a great social bond with a lot of people, you know, if you trust other people, if you feel the freedom, you can be a happy guy. And maybe that's more important for each individual or us humans, to be happy rather than to have a lot of money. And what I would really like to see in society is also change towards being able to show, or to have the growth mindset in that, being able to show weaknesses, to talk about weaknesses. You know, it's always about having, you know, you have to be the strongest, you have to be the best, you have to be, you know, no, I don't have any weaknesses. But maybe the future is really about seeing good things we have, maybe seeing bad things we have. In some aspects, we're stronger. Some, you know, maybe, I don't know, to give you an example, maybe I'm a less diligent guy than you are, but it doesn't make me a weaker person in that sense. You know, maybe you are more conscientious than I am, but it doesn't make me a worse person than you. So maybe we should just analyze it less from like a good, bad point of view, so non-judgmental, but rather see it, okay, this person is more like this person is more like this. So how can we make the best out of it? And this is what we try to do in our company as well, actually.
I would like to pick this up. You spoke about weakness. Brené Brown did the famous TED Talk on vulnerability. I think you've seen that. It's about showing to be vulnerable and creating trust out of it. How did this podcast feel for you, and also showing this vulnerability, for example, experiences from your life, speaking about moments where you struggled? How did this feel to you in this context of a podcast, and what does it give to you, because you mentioned it right now?
I think it's great to talk about your past. Honestly, not because I want to brag. It has nothing to do with that. It's about showing that even though, like, let's say, even though I have a PhD, I've struggled with very difficult issues in the past. Like, it's not like something that's given to you. You have to fight for it. And when I was a bachelor student, for example, this kind of conversation with somebody would have been very interesting for me to see. Okay, like, he has struggled in the past. He's had difficult issues. So no matter what I'm going to run into, I'm not alone with my struggles, right? It's like funny. Like we talk. Like, if you talk to, you probably know this too, young football players, sometimes you talk to and they feel like they're, it's the same with puberty, right? Kids always think that they're alone with their problems. They're like, nobody understands me. I'm unique with my issues. No, it's not like that. Like, a lot of people have experienced the same issues, and a lot of people have far worse issues. You talk to some people, grown-ups, they have like children that have cancer. It puts everything into perspective. So it's important to have a conversation. I think podcast is a great way to listen to interviews, conversations, to understand, there's people who struggle with other things that are actually far worse than my daily problems.
Yeah, for me, it was the moment I was 16, sitting in the locker room of my soccer team, of my football team. And then a guy who I thought like, oh, he's really good with girls. He said like, holy shit, I have really problems talking to one girl. And I just thought like, oh man, you have the same problems like me. I'm not a crazy guy. So you're not alone anymore. And it's like, it's just this feeling of, oh yeah, there's a connection, and oh yeah, it's like, it's not only my fear. And that was pretty interesting. So I can really underline that what you already said. Do you have a question from me in the end? No, I gave you a lot of questions. So do you have one from me?
I think one of the biggest things, what are your goals in life?
My goals,
not only with this podcast, I mean, in general. I know you're a very ambitious guy, like, you've gone to the US also, for career reasons. I think it's a great, like, risky step. But what are your goals in life? What are your targets? And have you written them down?
Oh yeah, like in the context of, I read this book, Big Five for Life, I think 1 or 2 years ago, from John Strzelecki. And I think there is also this, like, what is your, why do you exist? That's what you write down, and then you write down your goals for life. And what really changed from me in the last couple of months and years as well is because you always aim for the next step. So when you first go to Leipzig, for example, to get a professional soccer coach, then you want to be, you go to the next step, you want to get a head coach, and then you think about, okay, you think bigger and bigger. And for me, it's like with every step I take, I think bigger in a way of impacting. So basically, in the beginning, I impacted maybe a little club wherever in Western Germany. Then I tried to impact more and more guys, and now I really feel like, okay, I tried my message. I tried to impact not as much as possible, but the people who are receptive for it. And I would like to have an impact on an organization, on a club, which is really profound. And it's not like, okay, this guy was 1 year here and then he left, and then it's like, okay, everything goes back to whatever. And then I try to, like, what I asked you is like this, I try to be the change what I want to see in the world. And this change right now is, and that's funny because we spoke, it's like, I have the feeling that the world is a lot is in the brain. Like, everybody is like going back and forth with scientific things, with argumentation, with real facts, and like trying to resolve everything in his brain. And I think some things we can only resolve in our hearts. Like, some things is like this empathetic moments where you maybe have your scale and your frequency, and you feel like, what does a player need in this moment? That's something what maybe comes from your heart or from your system. And that's what I feel what we can do more and more. And what also I learned from the past is, when I just were in my cognitive goals and said like, okay, I want to be the next coach for whatever, first Bundesliga, whatever I want to go, I wasn't that appreciating for the moment. I wasn't that there for the players. Then when you say, okay, happiness is a big factor, but when you say, okay, I try to be in my heart, and then everything else follows through. So the score
Yeah.
takes care of itself. So I try to get in this moment of the score takes care of itself. But for sure, when you ask me for my goals for my life, I want to be a good father for my kids. I want to be a good husband for my wife, in the way that I spend time and care for them. And then also have the privilege to work in football and to spend time there. So I want to give qualitative time to my job and to my family. And I think that's a big goal for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you put that down great. I think there's I have this feeling that you constantly try to improve yourself, but then giving back to the people that you meet in turn, to give them that knowledge, or maybe like you said, like live the change that you want to see, to make them happier in the end, or make them, I don't know, get to their goals, right? I mean, that's a great way of satisfaction, right? That's enough.
Yeah. So Niklas, what I do in the end is always we do 1 minute of silence, of inner stillness. And after that, I will give over for the last word. So we have 1 minute, and also the listener to this podcast has a minute, not to go to the next WhatsApp or to the next podcast episode. He can really feel through it, get it grounded, and then we speak about it.
All right.
Okay. Niklas, coming back into the moment, I feel like with your profession and who you are, combining heart and head and brain, I think you are this podcast can be an eye-opener for everybody. And I feel deep gratitude for speaking to you in the way that eye level is here, but also eye-opening, and that it was for me in different cases. So thank you for that, and I will give over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. I think it was a great experience for me too. So thanks for having me on there and considering me, first of all. I know you're always a door opener, so I'm very thankful for that. Yeah, I think I want to give or tell everybody out there, just follow your dreams, find your purpose in life, follow it. Don't care about what anybody else says. You can achieve your dreams. Your limit is really in your head. And there's a good saying by Dalai Lama, who I'm a really big fan of, actually. I can close up with. It's called wait, one sec. I have to look it up. Let me get it. One sec.
Yeah.
It's the more you're motivated by love, the more fearless and free your actions will be. So really love what you do, give it all, and let's see how it works out.